Step into the blood-soaked sandals of history's most infamous warrior king. This is not just the story of a last stand. It's the untold journey of a boy born into brutality, forged in pain, and crowned in shadow. Long before Thermopylae became legend, Leonidas walked through hell wearing the crimson cloak of Sparta. Discover the agony behind the glory, the mysteries buried beneath the hot gates, and the world that trembled when 300 men refused to kneel. This is Leonidas, before the myth, beyond the movie, and deeper than history dared to tell. They tell you about the 300. They show you the glory, the defiance, the iconic last stand. But they never tell you what it costs to become the kind of man who can look death in the face and smile. They don't tell you about the boy who was beaten until he stopped crying, the prince who watched his brother die so he could live, the king who knew, long before he marched to Thermopylae, that he was already dead. This is not the story of a battle. This is the story of what happens when a human being is sharpened into a weapon and then asked to save the world. Forget everything you think you know. This is Leonidas. Segment 1. Before the legend, life in the shadows. The Peloponnesian sun rises over Sparta, but it brings no warmth. Not here. Not in this valley where boys learn to bleed before they learn to read. The city itself feels like a clenched fist, stone walls, iron gates, and silence. No music. No poetry in the streets. Only the rhythmic clang of bronze on bronze, the heavy breathing of warriors in training, and the ever-present smell of sweat, leather, and dust. Leonidas is born in 540 BC, but he is not born to be king. He is the third son of King Xerxes II, which means he is nothing. In Sparta, only the firstborn son matters. The others are spares, backup plans in case the heir dies. And so Leonidas grows up in the shadow of his brothers, particularly Cleomenes, the eldest, the chosen one, the future. But being a spare does not save you from the agoge. Nothing saves you from the agoge. At 7 years old, Leonidas is ripped from his mother's arms and thrown into the most brutal military training program the ancient world has ever devised. The agoge is not a school. It is a crucible. It is designed to break you, to strip away everything soft, everything human, and rebuild you as something else. Something harder. The boys are given one cloak. One. It must last them through freezing winter nights and scorching summer days. They sleep on beds made of reeds they gather themselves from the riverbanks, and those reeds are sharp, cutting into their backs as they try to rest. They are fed just enough to keep them alive, but never enough to satisfy. Hunger becomes a constant companion, gnawing at their bellies, teaching them that comfort is weakness. Leonidas learns to steal food. All the boys do. It is encouraged, even expected. But if you are caught, you are beaten, not for stealing, but for being clumsy enough to get caught. The logic is brutal and clear. A good warrior takes what he needs. A poor warrior gets punished. The instructors, the paedonomos, and the older boys assigned to watch over the younger ones are merciless. They carry whips and clubs, and they use them. Every mistake is met with pain. Stumbled during a drill? Whipped. Show fear? Beaten. Cry out. Worse. The message is hammered into their bones with every blow. Spartans do not break. Spartans do not yield. Spartans do not feel. But Leonidas does feel. He is just smart enough, just strong enough, to hide it. He watches the other boys. Some of them collapse under the pressure. Some are sent away in disgrace, labeled Trizantes, tremblers, cowards. Their families are shamed forever. One boy, a friend of Leonidas, hangs himself in the night rather than face another day. No one speaks of him again. His name is erased. In Sparta, weakness is worse than death. Leonidas learns to compartmentalize. He learns to lock away the fear, the pain, the sorrow. He learns to become stone. The training is relentless. They run for miles every day, barefoot over rocky terrain, until their feet are calloused and bloody. They wrestle until their bodies are bruised and battered. They practice with weapons, spears, swords, shields, until their hands blister and their arms shake with exhaustion. And always, they are watched. The instructors are looking for something. Strength, yes, but also discipline. Obedience, the ability to endure. There is one exercise that stands out in Leonidas's memory, even decades later. The diamastagosis, the whipping contest. Older boys are tied to an altar and whipped until they pass out or die. The point is not punishment. The point is to prove you can take it, to prove you will not scream. Leonidas watches as boys his age are beaten until their backs are raw meat, and he knows that one day it will be his turn. The thought does not terrify him. It should, but it doesn't. By then, he has learned to disconnect from his body, to view pain as information, nothing more. And then there are the night raids. The Cryptia. When Leonidas is older, in his late teens, he is selected for this secret rite. The Cryptia is Sparta's way of culling the Helot population, the enslaved people who work the land and outnumber the Spartans 10-1. The boys are sent out into the countryside at night, armed only with a dagger, and told to kill Helots. Any Helots. It does not matter if they are old men or young boys. The point is to instill terror, to remind the Helots who holds the power, and to teach the Spartan youth that mercy is a luxury they cannot afford. Leonidas remembers his first kill. A Helot farmer, middle-aged, walking home along a dark road. Leonidas steps out of the shadows, and the man freezes. There is a moment, just a moment, where their eyes meet. The Helot does not beg. He knows there is no point. Leonidas drives the dagger into his throat, quick and clean, and watches as the man crumples to the ground. He feels nothing. He is supposed to feel nothing. But later, alone in the darkness, he wonders if something inside him has died along with that farmer. This is what it means to be Spartan. This is the cost. But Leonidas is still not destined for greatness. He is still just the third son, the spare. His brother Cleomenes becomes king when their father dies, and Leonidas steps further into the shadows. He serves as a soldier, a hoplite in the Spartan army. He fights in skirmishes and small wars, earning a reputation for steadiness and courage, but he is not remarkable. Not yet. And then Cleomenes goes mad. It starts slowly, paranoid delusions, erratic behavior, fits of rage. Some say it is divine punishment. Others whisper that he drank too much unmixed wine, which the Greeks believe can drive a man insane. Whatever the cause, Cleomenes becomes a liability. He mutilates himself in a frenzy, cutting his own flesh with a knife until he bleeds out and dies. The second brother, Dorius, is already dead, killed years earlier in a failed attempt to establish a colony in Sicily. He was ambitious, reckless, and it got him killed. Which leaves Leonidas. At nearly 60 years old, an age when most men are considering retirement, Leonidas becomes king of Sparta. It is not a prize. It is a burden. He inherits a city-state surrounded by enemies, a fragile alliance with the other Greek city-states, and a looming threat from the east. The Persian Empire, the largest and most powerful empire the world has ever seen. Leonidas has spent his entire life preparing to be a soldier. Now he must learn to be a king. But even as he sits on the throne, even as he wears the crown, he does not forget the boy he once was. The boy who shivered in the cold, who stole food to survive, who killed because he was told to. That boy is still inside him, buried deep, waiting. Sparta is not a place of comfort or beauty. It is a place of discipline, sacrifice, and blood. And Leonidas is its perfect product, a man who has been broken and rebuilt so many times that he no longer knows where the cracks are. He is a weapon, and soon, the world will need him to be exactly that. Segment 2. Rise of the Warrior, the Path to Glory. Leonidas does not rise to power through ambition. He rises because everyone else dies. But before he is king, he is a warrior. And it is on the battlefield that he earns his name. Sparta is always at war. If not with foreign enemies, then with itself, or with the Helots who outnumber them, and must be kept in check through constant terror. For a Spartan hoplite, war is not an interruption of life, it is life. And Leonidas is very, very good at it. He fights in the phalanx, the heart of Spartan military might. The phalanx is a wall of bronze and flesh, heavily armored men standing shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping, spears bristling forward like the quills of a porcupine. It is a formation that requires absolute trust. Your shield protects the man on your left. His shield protects you. If one man breaks, the entire line collapses. And so Spartans do not break. Leonidas learns this early. He learns to move in perfect sync with his brothers in arms, to hold the line even when the enemy crashes into them like a wave against a cliff. He learns to kill efficiently. A thrust of the spear through the gap in an enemy's armor, a shove of the shield to knock them off balance, a quick stab downward with the short sword when they fall. He learns to step over the bodies of the dead and keep moving forward. But it is not just physical skill that makes Leonidas exceptional. It is his mind. He is calm under pressure. While other men panic, he thinks. While other men flee, he holds. He has spent so long controlling his fear, locking it away in that dark place inside him, that he has become something rare, a man who can face death without flinching. His first major battle comes during a conflict with Argos, Sparta's ancient rival. The two city-states have hated each other for generations, and their wars are vicious and personal. Leonidas is still young, still just another hoplite in the line, but he distinguishes himself. When the phalanx buckles under a fierce Argive assault, it is Leonidas who rallies the men around him, who holds the line long enough for reinforcements to arrive. He does not do it with speeches or bravado. He does it by simply refusing to move. The men see him standing there, immovable, and they find their courage. After the battle, his commander notices him, not because Leonidas sought glory, but because he was reliable. In Sparta, that is the highest praise. Years pass. Leonidas fights in more battles, more skirmishes. He earns scars, a deep gash across his ribs from a spear thrust that nearly killed him, a jagged line along his forearm from a sword that slipped past his guard. Each scar is a lesson, each wound a reminder that he is mortal. But he never forgets the lessons of the agoge. Pain is temporary. Death is inevitable. All that matters is duty. And then comes the moment that changes everything. It is 480 BC. Leonidas is king now, but the crown sits heavy on his head. The Persian Empire, under King Xerxes, is invading Greece. The Persians are not just an army. They are a flood, a tidal wave of men and steel sweeping across the known world. They have already conquered Egypt, Babylon, and the Ionian Greeks. Now they come for the mainland. The Greek city-states are divided, fractious, suspicious of one another. Athens, Corinth, Thebes, Sparta, each has its own agenda, its own pride. But they all agree on one thing. If the Persians are not stopped, Greece will fall. The question is, where do you stop an army of over 100,000 men? The answer is Thermopylae, the Hot Gates. It is a narrow pass between the mountains and the sea, so narrow that the Persian numbers will mean nothing. In that tight corridor, a small force of well-trained warriors can hold off an army. For a while at least. Leonidas volunteers. He will take a force to Thermopylae and buy time for the rest of Greece to mobilize. But there is a problem. The Olympic Games are underway, and Spartan law forbids the army from marching during the sacred truce. The ephors, the religious leaders of Sparta, consult the oracle at Delphi, and the prophecy they receive is grim. Either Sparta will fall, or a king of Sparta will die. Leonidas knows what this means. He has always known. From the moment he became king, he has been living on borrowed time. The crown was never meant for him. His brothers should have ruled. But they are dead, and he is here, and now the gods demand payment. He chooses 300 men. Not just any men. He chooses warriors who have living sons, men whose bloodlines will continue even if they die. He knows they are not coming back. They all know. But they go anyway, because they are Spartans, and this is what Spartans do. The march to Thermopylae is quiet. There is no singing, no boasting. Just the steady tramp of feet, the clink of armor, the weight of what is to come. Leonidas walks at the front, his crimson cloak draped over his shoulders, his face set in stone. He does not speak of fear. He does not speak of death. He speaks only of duty. When they arrive at Thermopylae, they are joined by a few thousand other Greeks, Thespians, Thebans, Phocians. Together, they number perhaps 7,000. Against them, the Persians bring a force so vast it takes days to count. Xerxes sends a messenger. "Surrender your weapons," the messenger says. Leonidas's response is immortal. "Come and take them." The battle begins. For 2 days, the Greeks hold. Wave after wave of Persian soldiers crash against the phalanx and are shattered. The Spartans fight like machines, efficient, brutal, unstoppable. Leonidas is everywhere, moving up and down the line, encouraging his men, filling gaps, killing anyone who gets too close. He fights with a spear until it breaks, then with a sword, then with his bare hands if necessary. Blood soaks the ground. Bodies pile up so high that the Greeks have to pause to clear them away just to have room to fight. Xerxes watches from a distance, and for the first time in his life, he feels something like fear. These are not men. They are demons. But betrayal comes, as it always does. A local Greek, a man named Ephialtes, shows the Persians a hidden mountain path that leads around the pass. By the third day, the Greeks are surrounded. Leonidas knows it is over. He dismisses most of the allies, sending them home to fight another day. But the 300 Spartans stay. They have always known this was a one-way trip. And when the final assault comes, they do not retreat. They do not surrender. They die standing. Leonidas falls in the chaos, spear in hand, surrounded by the bodies of his enemies. The Persians swarm over his corpse, and Xerxes, in a fit of rage, orders Leonidas's head cut off and his body crucified, a desecration reserved for the worst criminals. It is an insult, a final humiliation. But it does not matter. Leonidas is already immortal. His name will echo through history. His sacrifice will inspire a united Greece to rise up and drive the Persians back. At the Battle of Plataea, 1 year later, the Greeks will crush the Persian army, and Xerxes will flee home in disgrace. Leonidas bought them that time. With his blood, with the blood of his 300, he gave Greece a chance. And in the end, that is all any warrior can hope for, a death that matters. Segment 3. Myths, Secrets, and Unsolved Mysteries. But Thermopylae is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the myth. Even in his own time, Leonidas was more than a man. He was a symbol. And over the centuries, that symbol has grown, twisted, and transformed into something almost unrecognizable. The truth and the legend have become so intertwined that it is nearly impossible to separate them. Let us begin with the oracle. The prophecy given to Sparta before Thermopylae, either Sparta will fall or a king of Sparta will die, has haunted historians for millennia. Did the oracle truly foresee Leonidas's death? Or was the prophecy a convenient justification after the fact, a way to turn a military defeat into a divine sacrifice? The ancient Greeks believed deeply in prophecy. The oracle at Delphi was not just a religious figure. She was the voice of Apollo himself, the god of prophecy and truth. Kings and generals consulted her before making major decisions, and her words were treated as absolute. But modern scholars point out that the prophecies were often vague, open to interpretation, and conveniently reinterpreted after events had already occurred. So did Leonidas truly believe he was marching to his death because the gods demanded it? Or did he see the strategic necessity of the stand and use the prophecy to give his sacrifice greater meaning? We will never know. But what we do know is that the prophecy worked. It gave Leonidas's death a mythic weight, transforming a tactical defeat into a spiritual victory. And then there is the mystery of the battlefield itself. For centuries, historians and archaeologists have searched for physical evidence of the Battle of Thermopylae, and what they have found is almost nothing. No mass graves, no hordes of weapons, no definitive proof that the battle even happened the way Herodotus described it. This is not entirely surprising. Thermopylae is not a static place. The landscape has changed dramatically over the past 2,500 years. The sea has receded, silt has filled in the narrow pass, and what was once a choke point between mountain and ocean is now several miles inland. The battlefield Leonidas fought on is buried under centuries of sediment. But the lack of evidence has led some to question the scale of the battle. Was it truly 300 Spartans against hundreds of thousands of Persians? Or has the story been exaggerated over time? Herodotus, our primary source for the battle, was writing 50 years after the event, and he was known to embellish. Some modern historians suggest the Persian army may have been much smaller, perhaps 70,000 to 100,000 men rather than the million or more that ancient sources claim. But does it matter? The truth of Thermopylae is not in the numbers. It is in the act. A small force held off a much larger one for 3 days, buying time for Greece to unite. Whether the Persians numbered 100,000 or a million, the Spartans still stood their ground and died fighting. The myth is built on that sacrifice, not on body counts. There is another mystery, darker and stranger, the fate of Leonidas's body. We know that Xerxes ordered Leonidas beheaded and crucified. It was a deliberate insult, a desecration meant to humiliate Sparta and warn other Greeks of the cost of resistance. But what happened to the body after that? According to some sources, the Spartans sent a delegation after the war to retrieve Leonidas's remains. They brought his bones back to Sparta and buried them with full honors. A shrine was erected, and annual games were held in his memory. But no physical evidence of this tomb has ever been found. Some historians believe it was destroyed in later conflicts. Others think it may still be buried somewhere beneath modern-day Sparta, waiting to be discovered. But there is another possibility, one that ancient sources hint at but never fully explain. Some say that Leonidas's body was never recovered, that it was left to rot on the cross as a warning, and that the Spartans simply built an empty tomb, a cenotaph, to honor his memory. If this is true, then Leonidas's actual remains are still out there somewhere, lost to time. And then there are the legends that grew around him, stories that blend history and myth into something larger than life. One story claims that Leonidas, on the night before the final battle, had a dream. In the dream, he saw a lion, the symbol of Sparta, standing on a mountain peak, surrounded by wolves. The wolves circled, snarling, but the lion did not move. And then, just as the wolves were about to attack, the lion roared, and the sound was so powerful that the wolves fled in terror. When Leonidas woke, he knew what the dream meant. He would stand his ground, and his roar, his defiance, would echo through history, even if his body fell. Another legend says that one of the 300, a warrior named Aristodemus, survived the battle. He had been sent away before the final stand, afflicted with an eye infection that left him temporarily blind. When he returned to Sparta, he was shamed as a coward, labeled a Trizantes, a trembler. He lived the rest of his life in disgrace, shunned by his fellow Spartans. But 1 year later, at the Battle of Plataea, he fought with a frenzy, throwing himself into the thickest part of the fighting, seeking death to redeem his honor. He died a hero's death, and the Spartans forgave him. But the question remains, was he truly a coward, or was he simply unlucky? And did Leonidas send him away to save him, knowing that someone needed to survive to tell the story? These are the mysteries that swirl around Thermopylae, and perhaps that is fitting, because Leonidas was never just a man. He was an idea, the idea that some things are worth dying for. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to stand even when you are afraid. That duty matters more than life. And ideas, unlike men, cannot be killed. Segment 4. Power, Glory, and the World They Left Behind. Let us step back now, away from the blood and the battlefield, and look at the world Leonidas left behind. Sparta was not like other Greek city-states. While Athens built theaters and debated philosophy in the agora, Sparta built warriors. While Corinth grew rich through trade, Sparta despised wealth. While other cities celebrated art and culture, Sparta celebrated only one thing: victory. This was by design. Centuries before Leonidas, Sparta had faced a crisis. The Helots, the enslaved population who worked the land, had revolted. It took years to put down the rebellion, and the Spartans realized they were vulnerable. They were outnumbered 10-1 by the people they oppressed. If the Helots ever united again, Sparta would fall. And so Sparta made a choice. It would turn itself into a military machine, a society where every citizen was a soldier and every aspect of life was dedicated to war. The agoge was established. Weakness was purged. Mercy was abandoned. Sparta became a nation built on discipline, brutality, and fear. But this came at a cost. Spartan citizens, the Spartiates, were forbidden from engaging in trade or manual labor. That was the work of the Helots and the Perioikoi, the free but non-citizen inhabitants of Spartan territory. Spartiates were expected to devote their entire lives to military training and service. They ate communal meals in military messes, lived in barracks even after marriage, and were constantly watched to ensure they upheld Spartan values. This created a society that was extraordinarily effective in war, but brittle in peace. Sparta produced almost no art, no literature, no philosophy. Its contributions to Greek culture were minimal. What it did produce were warriors. Men like Leonidas, who could hold a line against impossible odds, who could endure any hardship, who could die without hesitation. But even in Sparta, not everyone could live up to the ideal. The Trizantes, the cowards, were shamed and ostracized. They were forced to wear rags, forbidden from marrying, barred from public life. They were living ghosts, reminders of what happened when you failed to be Spartan enough. And the women, the Spartan women were unlike any others in Greece. They were educated, physically trained, and expected to be strong. They owned property, managed estates, and held significant power within Spartan society. The reason was practical. The men were always away at war, so the women had to run everything else. But it also created a culture where women were respected in a way they were not in Athens or Corinth. A famous story tells of a foreign woman who asked a Spartan woman why Spartan women were the only ones who could rule men. The Spartan woman replied, "Because we are the only ones who give birth to men." But even this strength came with a dark side. Spartan mothers were expected to send their sons off to war without tears, to accept their deaths without mourning. There are stories of mothers killing their own sons if they returned home as cowards. "Come back with your shield or on it," they would say, meaning return victorious or return dead. To return without your shield meant you had thrown it away to run faster. That was unforgivable. This was the world Leonidas ruled. A world where everything, love, family, life itself, was secondary to duty. And when Leonidas died at Thermopylae, Sparta mourned, but it did not weep. His widow, Gorgo, one of the most intelligent and influential women in Spartan history, did not collapse in grief. She honored him by continuing to serve Sparta, by raising her son to be a warrior, by embodying the strength that Sparta demanded. But outside of Sparta, the reaction was different. Athens, which had long viewed Sparta with suspicion and rivalry, saw Thermopylae as a turning point. The Athenians had their own battles to fight, at Marathon, at Salamis, but they understood what Leonidas had done. He had bought them time, and so they honored him, not as a Spartan, but as a Greek, a hero who had saved all of Greece, not just his own city. The victory at Plataea, 1 year after Thermopylae, was made possible by the time Leonidas had bought. The Greek city-states, inspired by the Spartans' sacrifice, united in a way they never had before. They crushed the Persian army, and Xerxes fled back to Persia, his dreams of conquest shattered. Greece was saved, and the credit, in large part, went to Leonidas and his 300. But even in victory, the Greeks could not stay united. Within decades, Athens and Sparta were at war with each other in the devastating Peloponnesian War. The unity that Thermopylae had inspired crumbled under the weight of ambition, pride, and old rivalries. Sparta would eventually defeat Athens, but the victory was hollow. Both city-states were exhausted, weakened, and vulnerable. Within a century, they would both fall to Philip II of Macedon and his son, Alexander the Great. Sparta, the city that had once been invincible, faded into irrelevance. Its population declined. Its military power waned. By the time of the Roman Empire, Sparta was little more than a tourist attraction, a place where Romans came to watch reenactments of the old Spartan customs, like watching a theme park version of history. But Leonidas's legacy did not fade. The story of Thermopylae was told and retold. Herodotus immortalized it in his histories. Poets wrote odes. Sculptors carved monuments. And over the centuries, Leonidas became more than a king, more than a warrior. He became a symbol. In the modern world, Leonidas has been resurrected again and again. During World War II, Greek soldiers defending against the Axis invaders invoked his name. The monument at Thermopylae, which reads, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie," became a rallying cry for resistance against tyranny. In popular culture, Leonidas has been turned into a superhero, a cinematic icon. The film 300 portrayed him as a larger-than-life warrior, all rippling muscles and defiant speeches. It was not historically accurate, but accuracy was not the point. The point was the myth. The idea that one man, with courage and conviction, can stand against the tide of history and make a difference. And perhaps that is the true legacy of Leonidas. Not the details of the battle, not the exact number of Persians he killed, but the idea that sacrifice matters. That duty matters. That some things are worth dying for. He was not a perfect man. He was a product of a brutal, rigid society that valued obedience over individuality, strength over compassion. He was a killer, trained from childhood to take lives without hesitation. He lived in a world of violence and oppression, and he upheld that world without question. But he also stood his ground when it mattered most. He faced an impossible enemy and refused to back down. He gave his life so that others could live. And for that, he is remembered. Sparta is gone. The helots are free. The agoge is no more. But Leonidas endures. Because legends do not die. They wait, buried in the hot dust of Thermopylae, ready to be awakened whenever the world needs to be reminded that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to stand even when you are afraid. And that is the story of Leonidas. Not the myth, not the movie, but the man and the world he left behind.